Okay, so we are about 10 lines down on Ayin Tes Amar Aleph. We were learning about when a masker is responsible to give a new animal. When could the masker tell the soicher mas l'chagaram, and the rental is fine? For instance, by a nagria, if it was seized by the government, that's your muzzle, and you just have to wait till it comes back. Hayom arba v'esmiyom shehem shloisha shavuos shloisha yomim loimer. Amar Rabba bar Afuna Amar Rav. Hasoicher es hachamor lirkoi v'leh. And if you remember, right at the end of yesterday, we learned that the chamor has to be in better condition to ride it than just to carry packages other than glass, because if you're riding it and it's not steady, you could fall off and get hurt. In middle of the road, it dies. So you rent a chamor, let's say, to go to New York, and the car breaks down in Syracuse. So the halacha is nois and nois charai shel chatzei there. You do have to pay the cost of the rental up until the point where the car broke down. The ein lo yalav ela tarumis, and he only has tarumis. It's not clear who has tarumis. Does the masker have tarumis? Does the soicher have tarumis? So the Gemara probes. Heichidam, idishchiach lagure. If it's very easy to find another rental car to rent the car for the rest of the way, tarumis maya vidite. Why would there be any tarumis at all? Let the renter rent the car for the next half of the journey. I guess in those days they didn't charge you by the day; they charged you by the mile. So you're gonna end up getting a different car, and it'll be the same thing. If you can't find a place to rent over there, well then then why should I pay him for delivering me to a wilderness? It's useless. The emes is speaking where he wouldn't be able to find another rental. So why should the seicher have to pay anything at all? You basically gave me a car to take me into the wilderness. If this would have been your destination, lav igra bois lamesa, you would have had to pay to get here. I got you here. So that's very difficult to understand. Because if I wanted to go here, but I didn't want to go here, so you messed me up. So the top Tosfos deals with that question. Zogt Tosfos, ilu atacha bois lamesi, lav agra bois lamesa. Fact Tosfos tema the hashtemia the lav atacha bois lamesi. I didn't want to end up in Syracuse, so you messed me up. Lama yitin loischar. Why should I pay anything? You didn't help me get to Syracuse. You didn't get me to New York, so you messed me up. It doesn't mean you can't find. Yes, he could find another rental, and he will be able to make his way to New York, to his final destination. But let's say he was paying 25 cents a mile. If he rents in Syracuse to take him to New York, he's going to pay 30 cents a mile. Aval b'tfei Porto is a little bit more, paying a small premium. Yimotzei lahasker. He will be able to find a rental to take him the rest of the way. And therefore, he still has benefited by the fact that he reached up until this point, at least at a lower rate. He has to pay in full the amount that he used the car up until here. And the masker does not have to give a discount to the soicher to compensate for mashazen noisin ata yoser ma'at mikan veilach. He doesn't have to compensate the soicher for that. Even the who honest, because he's considered an honest. He died in the middle of the way; it wasn't expected, and therefore the masker is part. So then, who's going to have tarumais? Then clearly, the person having tarumais will be the soicher, because the masker got whatever he wanted. It's the soicher who got messed up. I guess we're talking about an animal that he sent was inspected. It had a 22-point check before it was sent out. Inami, maybe what it means is not that he could find somebody to take him to New York. Rather, he could, whatever goods he was planning to sell in New York, he can sell in Syracuse as well. There's many people that don't take it all the way to New York. They actually sell here in Syracuse. Therefore, Therefore, he has to pay the schar until that point because he could still sell. I assume it's not as much as he would get in New York, but since he could still sell, he's entitled. The masker is entitled to his full pay for that portion of the trip. Okay, Zog to Gemara weiter. Hey Chidami, we still need to drill down more into understanding this case because either shchiach lagure. No, we did this already. Ida amalei chamor stam. If when the rental agreement was written up, the rental said, "I will provide you with a chamor." Well, if that's the case, so then right now it's incumbent on the maskir to arrange another chamor because his commitment was, "I'm going to get you a chamor," and since the first chamor stopped working at this point, now his job, his responsibility is to get another chamor. And if he said, "I'm only renting you this specific chamor," well, then the soicher has a right to extract from this chamor the trip. What does that mean? If they could sell this nevela, this animal that died, and buy maybe a smaller chamor, a chamor that will at least get him to his destination, yikach, then that's what they should do. This nevela, whatever it's worth, if you sell it, you will not be able to buy with those funds a new chamor. But im yesh b'dameh liskar yiskar. What if you don't have enough money? If you sell the nevela to buy a chamor, but there's still enough money to rent a chamor, so you should be able to do that. Zok Gemara, who is talking? Who paskin this halacha? Rav. Rav l'taimei the Omar Rav loy mechalin karma. You don't do that to the masker. You don't put the masker into a position where he has a total loss. So you don't make him liquidate his chamor to do another rental, and then the masker will end up with nothing at all. And therefore, we can't force him to do it. Therefore, the soicher pesaf, the soicher pesaf, the soicher has to find his own way to finish his journey, and he can only have tarumais on the masker. The idmar, ha-soicher is a chamor. If you rent a chamor, umeisa loy b'chatzi eder. Amar Rav said, Im yesh b'dameh al likach, yikach, but liskar al yiskar, because that was Rav Shita, that you don't mechal yakarna, you don't use up the keren, you want the masker to at least remain with something. Ushmul Omar, af liskar yiskar. Shmuel holds no. The responsibility of the masker is from this animal, chamor zeh, I'm going to get you a rental, and I'm going to get you to New York. So whatever it takes, even if it means selling and with the money renting another animal, and now the masker has nothing left. But what is the mechalikas between Rav and Shmuel? Rav savar loy mechalin al karna. Rav holds you will never force a masker to lose everything. Shmuel savar mechalin al karna. The Gemara is going to ask a kasha on Rav. So here we're talking about mashkanta desura, and back in Ezeu Neshach, the Gemara was discussing what type of mashkanta is mutter and what is osir, and the Gemara said, atzur v'merabonon, even a regular mashkanta that's mutter for everybody else, atzur v'merabonon shouldn't do. It doesn't pass. However, there's a certain type of mashkanta called mashkanta desura that even atzur v'merabonon can do. And what is it? Let's say the tzur v'merabonon lends somebody $100,000. He's allowed to take a mashkin, a field, and they could write up in the star when he takes that star mashkanta that he's going to eat this field, eat the price of this field for, let's say, 5 years at $20,000 a year rent, whether the field produces or not. And then at the end of the 5 years, the field will go back to the loiva with no money exchanged. So that's crystal clear, not ribbis, that would be allowed. So what happens if what was given to the malva as a mashkin was a tree that was producing fruit, and the tree dried out and died, or nixas, or it got uprooted? There was a big storm. The halach is shnei masurim boy. The loiva or the malva may not cut this tree up and use its wood for firewood. You're not allowed to do that. And Rashi tells us you can't do the malva can't cut it up and use it for firewood because it will be mechal yakarno. The loiva won't get anything back at the end. The loiva can't do it because then the malva lost his mashkin. So what do you do? Ketzad yasa yilokach by karka, sell this cut down tree, buy a small property with the money that you get, and then you can continue the same mashkanta arrangement. Who oichel payers, and the malva will eat payers at the same rate per year until the end of the contract. Frag the Gemara. Buying a field is also machal yakarna. V'hacha kiven dechimati yovel kahadra ara lemara. Since when yovel arrives, this piece of property that they bought on behalf of the loiva is going to go back to the original owner. V'ka chal yakarna, and now the keren is going to be completely used up. The loiva will end up with nothing at the end. So, according to Rav, who holds that you never deplete completely the resources of the loiva, how were they able to buy a property? Zok to Gemara, hacha b'may askinon. You know what we're talking about? The zaven leila shitin shnin. The contract when they purchased the property is not forever. The contract said 60 years, and Zok Rab Chista that if you sell a property for a fixed amount of years, it's yovel proof. It doesn't go back by yovel. The Amar Rab Chista Amar Rav Katina minayin lemoicher sadeyu l'shishim shana. How do you know that if you sell your property for 60 years, it doesn't go back by Yovel? Shenemar, it says in the halach of Yovel, you're not allowed to sell land that will be permanent. So therefore, if the sale agreement was that if it wasn't for Yovel, it would be a permanent sale, because that was the sale contract, then that's what Yovel prevents from becoming a permanent sale. But that excludes a sale where the contract itself tells us that it's only for a limited time. This field that even if it wasn't for the Allah of Yovel, it still wouldn't be a permanent sale. Therefore, it would stand. But Frank the Gemara, that doesn't help, because it's still b'chal yakarna. Because soif l'chimatu shitin shnin kahadra ara lamora v'chakal yakarna. At the end of the 60 years, it's going to go back. So what's the difference if it goes back by yovel or if it goes back at the end of the contract? At the end of the day, we're forcing the loiva to buy a property that he's going to lose eventually, and then he'll be stuck with nothing. Elahacha b'may askinon. You know what the case is? Bisman she'ein hayovel nahi. This. Oh, thank you so much. This halacha is discussed in a period of time where there was no yovel. There was a time where there was no yovel. Yovel is only applicable when Kalal Yisrael is in the land of Eretz Yisrael, and not only in Eretz Yisrael, they're all in, each of the shvatim are in their designated chelek as per Yeshua's splitting of the land. Only then is there the loch of yovel. There's actually machlokes rishonim. If yovel was noyeg during the 70 years of Golus Bavel, and if it was noyeg during the second Beis Hamikdash, there's actually a shaila about that. However, in the times where Eina yovel noyeg, the Morris times, the Mishnah's times,
I don't see how.
So therefore, there's no problem.
I don't see how it could be relevant. And by Shani, you have 10 tribes not there. So it's like 3/4 of Eretz Yisrael. Can't be. Who does it go back to?
So what you're telling me is you understand it's sad that Yovel was not noig during the second Beis Hamikdash.
I don't understand the other tzad, how they could say
I don't know
not.
the sugya. Yeah, I don't know that sugya well, but I know there's a lot of controversy about it. And there's not, and that also leads to a whole other controversy, and that is if Yovel is year 50 and then year 1 is year 51, or do you say Yovel is year 49? Because the problem is, if we don't know where Yovel is, then how could we count the Shemitah cycle properly? So the question is Yovel, the question is Yovel, which is year 50, is that year 1 for the Shemitah cycle, or is that year 0 for the Shemitah cycle? If it's year 1, if it's year 0 for the Shemitah cycle, and then next year after Yovel, you'll start counting number 1, then we couldn't possibly have Shemitah anymore, because without knowing when Yovel is, how are we going to know when Shemitah is? So we must paskin, at least, otherwise we couldn't keep track of our Shemitahs. We must paskin that Yovel is year 50, but it's also year 1 in the Shemitah cycle.
Because Yovel's not right, then if you make the time 60 years, it doesn't go back again.
No, then it would go back. That's the contract. It's a long-term lease. It's 60 years. Is mechal yikana. The Gemara says, "Soif soif lechimatu shitin shnin kahadir ara lemara." The chakal yikana. Right. So the Gemara is chayzer, and the Gemara says the brisa that says.
Not talking where he said 60 years.
That's right. We're being chayzer from that teretz, and we're saying it's just speaking bisman sheina yovel noik. So therefore, when the loiva buys a property, he'll be able to keep it. I guess we're not worried about when Mashiach comes, he'll lose it. It's, as long as for now it's permanent, it's good enough. And hachinami mistab. It's mistaber to say that way. Because we're going to see, even if you hold that you can be machal yakarna, there's still a limit to what you're going to do. The sol kadaitach is mancha yovel noyik. If you're going to suggest that this price is referring to when yovel is noyik, umechalinan karna, and we allow the Karen to be completely lost, and that's why you can buy a property, then, Frank, the Gemara, why go through the effort and trouble of buying a property? Just chop the wood off. Just chop the wood up and let him burn it. Let the Malva use the wood to burn, and he'll have that value, right? The whole problem was we don't want to allow either one to chop the wood because it's going to be B'chalaikaina. So because of that, what did we do? We bought a property. If that property goes back, further ahead, you might as well just go back to the most basic suggestion. Let them split the wood. That's not fair because not all machal yikarnas are created equal. Why? Zimnin deshalmu shnei mashkanta mekama yovel. Even if you hold that you could be machal yikarna, but sometimes what will happen is let's say the mashkanta is 5 years, they buy a property in yovel for another 10 years. So at the end of the day, the loiva is still going to get the property. He's not going to have it forever. It's going to go back by yovel, but the loiva will still have benefit of that property up until yovel. Inami dematale zuza uparkla arba b'chamishnin mekamayovel. Or the loiva will be able to come up with the money to pay the malva, so he'll get the property back. So he'll have it a couple of years before yovel. So according to Rav, that wouldn't be allowed either. But according to Shmuel, that would be allowed. But if a zoyvai to use it for firewood, that's already too much of a waste. Now we're talking about renting a ship. So when you rented a ship, it's because you had goods and you wanted to sell it in a different city, and they would use a ship. Now, often those ships didn't have Johnson outboard motors, and they often didn't have sails. Often the way ships were moved were they were in a river, and they would tie a rope to the ship, and then they would pull the ship with a donkey walking along the riverbed, pulling the ship. I'm not sure if that's relevant to anything. I think it's relevant very soon. Hasaycher es hasfina b'tavalo b'chatzi haderech. The ship sank in the middle of the travel. Rav Nosson Omer, im Nosson lo yita. If the customer already prepaid the shipping, he can't demand the money back. But vim loy nosan, but if he had not yet paid for shipping, lo yitain, he does not have to pay. Correct, Gemara Heichedam. What are the circumstances that would justify such a psak? Ilema besvinazu b'yainsta. If the agreement was the owner of the ship said, I'm going to give you services with this specific ship, and what are you going to transport with it? Wine. You weren't referring to a specific lot of wine. I just said the deal I made with the shipper, I want to rent this ship to transport wine. So then, if I paid already, why can't I demand a refund? Namely, the soicher, the customer should tell the shipper, Havli Svinta, you made a commitment to give me your ship. You didn't give me your ship. I could bring wine. The wine that was in that ship, not a problem. I never said I'm renting your ship just for this particular wine. I said, Yain Stam. So get me your ship that you're obliged to provide for me. Because I'm going to bring wine. So I'm able to fulfill my end of the bargain. You're not able to fulfill your end of the bargain. I'm not paying you a penny. No, unless it was insured. No, I guess the Balasfina is not responsible. In those days, things were very different. Today, you would sue the guy to a zoo, right?
You ever rent?
Oh, thank you, Mati. What?
You rent a car and your stuff gets stolen from the rent car.
Right. Yeah, but if it breaks down and it blows up and your stuff gets burnt, I'm not sure if that would be different. Then they go after Tesla. If your car blows up, they go after Tesla. Ella Visvina Stam. Maybe it's speaking where the shipper said, I will provide you a ship. The yayin zeh for this specific lot of wine that you want to transport. So then, in fact, the more to be the opposite. If the customer did not get paid for shipping, why wouldn't you force him to pay for shipping? Turning on to Amid Base, Namelay, let the shipper say, Havli Hahu Chamra, give me the wine that we contracted for. Dig it up from the bottom of the river. I'll bring a different ship because I don't have to give you Bedafka this ship. I can get you any ship. So I could fulfill my obligation under the contract, yet you can't. Therefore, you need to pay me in full. Omar Papa, law, this psak of you only pay what you paid, you don't get back, but you don't have to pay. Because neither one can now fulfill their contract. And therefore, the yat hatoiveya ala tachtoina. As Rashi says in the third line, neither one of the parties to this agreement would be able to fulfill the agreement. Whoever is coming to Mon from the other one, he has the lower hand. The because the person will respond, you bring your end of the bargain, and then I'll deliver mine. And therefore, what you paid, you paid. What you didn't pay, you didn't pay. What if they both can still fulfill their t'nai? Because the t'nai was any ship and any wine. Cholkin, then in fact, they would split the difference, and they would each, they would eat. Oh, actually, that's a shaila what that means. Let's see how Rashi is. Rashi's cholkin is, in kiboil yachzer achetzi. If he got paid in full, he pays back half. And if he didn't pay at all, yitin achetzi. Both of these parties to this agreement could fulfill their obligation. And if the nitba will not want to fulfill it, then the other person say, I can do mine. Therefore, they split. There's actually a shita who holds that they split the remainder. So there's a whole shaila about it. Okay, Zok the Gemara weiter. Tanu Rabbanim. Hasoicher is hasvina. You're going to see the thing with the ropes, how you pull a ship is still going to be relevant. Hasoicher is hasvina. Someone rented a ship. Upar kala b'chatzi aderech. Rashi learns what happened is I rented a ship and I said, I want you to take my goods from the west end of the Erie Canal by Ohio or Pennsylvania, and I want you to transport it all the way to the Hudson River. And what happened was, halfway across, let's say by Rochester, I said, no, forget it. I'm unloading my goods in Rochester. So basically, I terminated my contract much earlier than I was supposed to. And I took out my goods. So the halach is noisin loischoroi shalchatzi aderech. He pays half of the way. Ve'ein loy olav ela terumas, and he only has terumas. So once again, we have to see who has the terumas. Hey chedami, ilema de kamashkach lagura. If it would be easy for this ship to find another load to take for the rest of the way, why should the owner of the ship have any tarumais? He's not losing anything. And if he won't be able to find anyone else that wants to send their goods the rest of the way, kula agra boy shlume, then the original customer who walked out in the middle of the contract should be mechuyev to pay in full. Let's say it's speaking where he could find another load. So why does the owner of the ship have tarumais? He's not losing anything. He's now going to pick up another load in Rochester that he can take to the Hudson River. Rashi says, Ri'uya hasvina, it weakens the ship. Loading and unloading a ship weakens it. So I'd rather load less and travel more, not keep unloading and unloading, because that takes its toll on the ship. So then why do you say that the owner of the ship only has tarumois? That's a legitimate grievance that's worth money. And the owner of the ship should have a good financial claim against the person who canceled the contract. My parka, the parka letoyane bigave. What does that mean, Dr. Rashi? The parka letoyane bigave bechatzi aderech hoisif losais bachavilos hayuloy. What happened is along the way I said, stop off in Rochester. I want to pick up more goods, and the case was because you might ask if the original deal was I'm taking it from Pennsylvania straight to the Hudson River, what right do you have to stop and pick up more goods? Because that was the deal. When I ordered the ship, I said, listen, I'm going to fill up the ship here in Pennsylvania, but I might need to stop along the way. I'm working on a deal, and if the deal goes through, I'm going to have to stop now in Rochester to pick up more stuff. I'm sorry? Right. So the Gemara says, I have the right to add along the way any other material, any other goods that I want to buy. And I'll pay you per pound. It's not like I'm not going to pay. If I load up your ship more, I'm going to pay you for it. So therefore, so he's not, and I'm even paying for it. So Frank the Gemara said, then what's the problem? Why could you have tarumas? You're picking up more goods, you're making more money. You're having a full load. You're much better off. Zok to Gemara, elamai tarumas. Zok to Gemara, either mishum shinu daita. You're hacking me at China. Ha'yisi sover lolechetz ma'ir v'lachzer ma'ir. I thought this would be a quick trip across the canal, back and forth. Now you're making it stops. It's going to schlep the trip out. I'm not happy about that. Inami ila ashlo yisera. Now, depending on how much the ship is loaded, its draft is lower. Draft in a ship is how much of the ship is below the water level. So the more a ship is loaded up, the more of the ship will be below the water level, which means the deeper water the ship needs to be in. So imagine you're towing a ship along the edge of the river. If it's relatively light, its draft will be maybe 12 inches. So you could keep the ship very close to the edge of the water and pull it with a rope. But if it's fully loaded and its draft could be 6 feet, that's how deep it sits into the water. Now you got to make sure that the ship stays really deep in the water. So the ropes that you're going to need to pull them with are going to have to be much longer. The problem is, when we left Pennsylvania, where I have my storage, where I have all my equipment, I took shorter ropes because this is the load that I had expected to carry. Now that you added so much load, I have to buy these extra ropes in the truck stop, where it's 10 times the price. And that's why he has timers. So I have to buy these ropes at a premium at a truck stop. As the ship becomes heavier, you have to move it to the center of the river where the water is the deepest. It shouldn't hit bottom. And therefore I'll need much longer ropes to pull it. You didn't tell me in advance that I would have known to bring those longer ropes along, that I would need them. And that's why there is a taina. Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. Correct. Tanu Rabban. Hasoicher es a chamor lirkov aleha. If you rent a chamor to ride. We have a couple of minutes. Tosfos doesn't like Rashi's pshat. So let's take a quick look at Tosfos because he has a whole different approach to this ship thing. The park l'toyda begavei. Pirish b'kuntris. Shehoisef hamasa b'chatzi adeh. Right, Rashi learns that the problem here is that the customer decided to stop off along the way and pick up some more goods. Correct Tosfos v'kosher. The havalil meimar parakla kivan shemimakim acher haya parak l'shvidim. It shouldn't be the park l'toyda begavei. The lashon should have been parakla. So the lashon Gemara doesn't seem to say this pshat that Rashi says that that you're adding more goods. My mafsid. The kol shekain toiv loy shemar v'yich yoser. What was the taina that he has? I thought it would be a quick trip to be there and back, and now I have to stop along the way. But he's making more money. So why would he be upset? Like, what's the big deal? He's making more money. He's making his profit is more dense. He's making more money per mile traveled. So why should there be a problem? Barach Pirish, you know what it means to park lataynei? Shemoicher schayra shebesfina laacher. What happened is he sold all of the product that he had on the ship. Someone was willing to take the entire load off of him and deal with selling it. He found a good deal. Hainu shinudas. So there's shinudas. Basically, what I've done is I've given all my goods. I've sold all my goods that are on your ship to somebody else. Now somebody else is going to be the Baldover. Somebody else is going to come and you're going to have to deal with. And he might not be the best customer. So I have kindness on you. I gave you a contract. Now you're forcing me to deal with the guy that you sold it. Inami la'ashli yisera. What does that mean? Shetzarech havolim lahoitzi kelim shel rishonim ulahachnis shel achronim. And now that you're moving off the ship, and he's moving on, so now I got to load and unload your stuff. That's the ashli yisera that I need. Why did the Gemara tell it on this way? Why didn't the Gemara say that really it's very easy to find somebody else to load up with and take his schar the rest of the way? And then you're going to ask, why can't the owner of the ship have terumas if he can easily find another customer? Because once you have the svar of shinidaita, I have to deal with a new person. So why do we have to come up with this whole new shop? We could have stuck to the same old shop that I could load up somebody else. The Rav said the Svina, the Baal to Gemara, had a svara that weakens the ship by loading and unloading. The fact is, it's a lot more than just a time of shinzaita. The fact is, it does weaken the ship, and it'll be a tightest moment. Okay. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Tandarabban, hasoich es chamor lirkoi v'la. Someone rented a chamor to ride it. So the halach is the owner of the chamor seems to come along as well. So the halach is soicher maniach alek susoi. The soicher is allowed. If I rented a chamor that I'm going to ride it myself, what type of baggage am I allowed? How many bags are you allowed to carry on baggage? You see, this whole thing with baggage had happened. It was gone. There's the whole story. So the question: how much carry on baggage are you allowed to have? So ksusoi, he's allowed to put his coat there. Vilignusoi, what is a lignusoi? I don't even know what that means. His flask, his drink. He's allowed to bring enough food for the entire trip. Entire trip. That's what he's allowed to bring along. I'm sorry? No package for anybody else. That's right. Mikan veilach. What? The Gemara, that's exactly what the Gemara is going to discuss now. Mikan veilach chamor ma'akavala. After that, the Baal Chamor said, listen, I didn't include so much carry-on. This is the carry-on you're allowed to bring, and nothing else. Chamor, what about the Chamor? He's there on the trip. He has to have stuff as well. So him and Nichal of Sa'irim, the Teven, in other words, the food that he's going to need to feed the animal along the way. The bus driver, he's only allowed to bring enough food for one day, not for the whole trip. He's going to have to buy at the truck stop. Right? Mikan ve'elech, soicher ma'akabalam. The soicher could say, no, I don't want to be overloaded over here. Okay. I would love to be able to tell the airline, oh, you don't let me take my carry-on? Oh, I don't let you put that in the plane either. Doesn't work that way. If you can easily find food at a rest area, so chamor nami le'akad. Why does the passenger get to bring food for the whole trip? Let him bring for one day, and let him also buy food at the rest area. And if you can't find food along the way at the rest areas, within soicher nami lo'ilakad. How could the soicher prevent the chamor from bringing enough food for the whole road? Let him. He's not going to be able to have food, so let him also bring enough food for the whole way. Omar Papa lo'tricha t'shchiach lemitrach lemesban me'avna la'avna. Every evening when you get to your hotel, the motel where you're going to stay, you can ask around, you can poke around, you can, if you work a little bit and hustle, you'll be able to find someone who's going to sell food that you'll have for tomorrow. Chamor darker lemitrach lemesban. the truck driver, that's what he does for a living. He's always moving around. So he's used to always asking in every city, where can I pick up some food? Where can I get some packaged meals for tomorrow? But Soicher, Lav Dakilim, he packs along normally all the food that he needs for the trip, and he doesn't run around looking for places to buy food, and therefore he's allowed to bring all this food, and the owner of the donkey could only bring enough for today.
Drivers didn't get free. You know, now you go to the truck stop.
But they give their free food because they buy gas there.
They bring.
Even the bus driver. Okay, yeah. Tanu Rabban, Kasoicher es a chamor lirkayv aleho ish. Who do you think it's harder for a donkey to carry, a man or a woman? I would have thought a man's much harder. A man's heavier. No?
And complains a lot.
Yeah, but that's a big difference to the animal. Chamor doesn't.
Sure.
It could be heavier one too.
The Gemara is going to discuss it. So Zok more Tashma. Tanu Rabban. Hasoicher es a chamor lirkayv aleho ish. Loy sirka aleho isha. You're not allowed to put a woman on. It's mashma that it's harder on the chamor. I don't know. Maybe they sit side saddle. Maybe the way they sit. I don't know. What? Isha, but if the deal was that I was going to transport an Isha on the Chamor, Roicha v'la Ish, there a man could be right. Clearly, it's less trouble for an Ish. The Isha, as Moti said, Ben Gedoyla uben Kedana, she's a big mama or a small mama, Rafilu mi'uberes, even if she's mi'uberes, Vafilu manika. Now, when you read this Gemara as is, it sounds very much that a manika is even heavier than the mu'beres, right? And that's what the Gemara says. Hashta manika amrit. If even a manika you could bring, which is her and the baby, mu'beres miboy, surely a mu'beres which is less heavy. So oy bazoi, why does the Brisa list off afilu mu'beres, afilu manika? All the Brisa should have said was afilu manika, and I would have known mu'beres. Amar Papa mi'uberes vehimenika ka'amar. You know, when it says vehimenika at the end, it means if she's a mu'beres and a manika. Amar Abaye shmamina. From this you see that benisa akarsa takla. If you have a fish and it has a big belly and its intestines are big, there's a lot of weight. It's very heavy. The big stomach makes it very heavy, and therefore, if you're buying fish and the fish guy takes a big fish with a big fat belly, tell him, no. I want you to cut the intestines out and then weigh the fish, because you're going to end up paying for a lot of intestines because it takes up a lot of space. Now, this is a very problematic Gemara, and let's see why. How do you see from the fact that Muberes v'himanika, how do you see that a fat belly means that it's very heavy? How do you see it from here? It doesn't clap. So Tosfos actually learns a little bit differently. I like learning Gemaras that dwell on fat bellies. It's Kishmak. Zog to Gemara. Let's see Tosfos. Hash to Manika Amrit. The Rachva, Muberes Miboy, Kach Girsha Sasvarim. Zog to Rebbein Tam, I don't like the Girsha. They nearly read Tam. The Ain's a Pircha. Why would it be a Pircha? Why is it a Kasha? If Menekes, you can have surely a Muberes. That's the normal way a Mishnah speaks. It builds up the Chiddush. The Zu Vav Sukatani. Not only a Muberes, but a Menekes as well. So why is it such a big Kasha? V'oid, the Ein Misyashiv Shaper Lefi Girsha Zu, Hadak Amar, Shemamina, Benisa Agav Karsha Takla. How do you see anything from here? Because a Muberes Vimanika is heavier than a regular Muberes.
Because it's a Afilu Muberes, you see that a Muberes is heavier. Which is a fat stomach, and it weighs a lot.
But it's much of Shemamina from this discussion with Muberes and Manika. Okay, here, I mean, that's how Rashi is going to learn. That's how the Girsa is going to learn. But Tosfos has an interesting twist. The Rebbeinu found a different Girsa, and this is how he learned. Hasha Muberes Amrat. If a Muberes is allowed to ride this donkey, Manika Beboy, so it's exactly the opposite. The Isha Muberes Kvei the Yoser Mimanika Imbana. A Muberes weighs more than Manika Imbana. If you take a woman right before she gives birth and you weigh her, she will weigh more than after she gives birth when she's holding her baby in her arms. Exactly. First of all, Lifi Shachai Noises Atzma Umekel. First of all, a baby that's born has the advantage of chaynos as atzmai. Aval kashuba me'imoi machbit. He makes it heavy. The gam, as Dubi says, malay adam. So a muberes will actually weigh more than a menika with her child. The hashdas to shapir. Hadakamer shmami na benisa agav kreisa takla. Because we're saying a muberes is heavier than even a woman with a child. So that's how he learns. Here, you're a big kid already. You need a lot of stuff, yeah. We'll stop here. Okay, let's stop here. So we finished the end of the We're exactly on the blot now, because the next mission starts right at the top.